fine. I think it's because I started this on without the HDMI. So I'm trying to route it over.
Would it be in your like computer's settings?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. And it sees both monitors. That's monitor 2. Let's see if I can just switch it. No.
What if you don't extend your monitor, just duplicate it?
Oh, there it is.
Yay! Okay.
I'm gonna make this chat window go away. I'll make this go away too. Okay, fine. Yeah, it'll be okay. All right. So you can hear me okay, Vivi?
I sure can.
Can you see the zombie hordes
Driving through the snow.
Hi,
Can you
everyone.
see the? All right. So quick introduction. Vivi and I worked together. She was my graduate student. Gosh, I don't even know how long ago at this point. But she did some extremely interesting research around graphical fidelity in games and biometric response to graphical richness. And then she presented it at SIGGRAPH Singapore, and ever since then she's been on a tear, just a little rock star. Now she's at Riot working on League of Legends. And so today she is going to tell you just about her job, what she does, what it's like to work in her area, you know, because so much of what we've done has been kind of programming and art and stuff like that. And Vivi brings it all together and helps build worlds. And so I thought it would be a really interesting talk if she just said what her experience is in making games that we all love. So, Vivi, I give you the floor.
Sweet. Well, thank you for the introduction, Dave. To everyone, hello. My name is Vivianette Ocasio. I am currently an associate UX designer at Riot Games. Out of curiosity, how many of you, if any, play League of Legends, are fans of League of Legends? Can you raise your hand so I can see?
Liar, please.
Yeah, the other ones are at home playing.
All right, that's totally cool. So there's roughly about like out of 20-ish UX designers at Riot Games, half of them work on League. I am not one of them. I actually work on overall like experiences our players have on web when they're not playing the game, which means that I work in the web space. I identify how to get everyone making web products at Riot onto the same page so that players can have a consistent experience within the game and outside of the game. And so, but before I get really into like the nitty-gritty of my work, I kind of wanted to just share a little bit about my journey, basically. I've been a huge video game fan since I was very little. This is a picture of me at, I don't know, age 1 or something, pointing at duck. But I really have been playing games since I was very young. My parents got me a lot of games. My dad was a very big game nerd. And I guess my parents told me that I told them at a very early age that I wanted to make games. I don't remember that. Most of the time, I remember thinking I want to be a veterinarian or astronaut or whatever. But I, from baby, said video games. And I chose Purdue because I actually was very undecided back then between my passion for gaming and my passion for animals. I love the animal kingdom, and at some point I wanted to be a veterinarian, but ultimately I made a decision to pursue my passion for gaming as a career while keeping my passion for animals and expressing that love for them as something to do outside work hours that I can de-stress when I get home, kind of thing. Um, some of my favorite video games right now, Frostpunk is absolutely phenomenal. Journey, obviously not new, but I'm actually playing a lot of quote unquote old games because I used to play progressively or World of Warcraft as a progressive raider, raid leader, and for many many years. And so I missed an opportunity of playing other games while I was just investing my time during World of Warcraft. Um, so I've been playing a lot of Undertale and like Nier Automata and Persona 5. This was my first chicken dinner in PUBG. I was super proud of myself for that. But out of all the games that I've been like exploring now recently, the one that I still love, and it's my all-time favorite of all time, it's still Kingdom Hearts. It combined two of my favorite things, which is Disney's, just Disney characters as a whole, and Final Fantasy. I still remember the opening cinematic, and I had a very strong emotional response while watching that intro clip when they have the music and the beautiful CG. I just was like it just moved me, and I'd never had a feeling like that, and I knew I wanted to make that feeling over and over and over, but I just didn't know what that was. So it got me thinking, like, how you can make like maybe a thematic or holistic experience to create such a powerful punch for players. And while at the time I didn't really understand what that meant, but I knew I wanted to explore it. Back then I thought that was 3D animation. So at Purdue, I started pursuing a degree in Bachelor's of Science in CGT, and then immediately followed that up with my Master's of Science. I also participated in a lot of extracurricular what is it, focus groups like SIGGRAPH. Per CGT used to have one called Game Developers Club. I'm not sure if that merged now with the CS department. Women in Technology and MTA were other associations that I was a part of, and they all helped me kind of develop the skills to eventually exercise at Riot in some way, shape, or form. But a combination of all these experiences, my internship at Australia with a agency that focused on commercial work, so I have some graphics and animation experience there. So a combination of all those things got me thinking more about like the animation space, and somewhere between year 2 and year 3 of my master's, I actually started hitting like a moment of realization of I'm moving away from gaming and more into movies. And that was actually something that I didn't want to do, but I didn't understand how that happened. That's when I actually reached out to Dave and was like, hey, like, I don't know what's going on, but this is a thing that's happening right now, and I feel like I've left the focus that I wanted to pursue. And Dave and I worked a lot on what that meant, and that's where I found a passion for like emotional responses and did the research on how graphical fidelity can improve or not emotional responses in video game players, and totally did like biometric data, analyzed that and compared it with self-reported data on how they were playing a mix between horror games, action games, between different genres and different graphical fidelity levels, so that we can understand like at what genres of gaming had to push their graphics to more photorealism levels, so that they would be like they would entice a specific emotional response to people versus ones that didn't really need it. In that time period during that testing is when I was able to save enough to go to GDC and talk to recruiters at different studios. And ultimately, that's where I found out that I was like looking at something related to user research or UX design, but I didn't really know what that was. All of this predates the user experience discipline at Purdue now. So we it was very much like I needed to learn something that I had no idea about. And so I started to continue to talk to those contacts, like those networks, specialty groups, um, and then the opportunity actually occurred where I applied. After 4 months of an interview process, I was able to join Riot, and I joined as their UX coordinator. That means that I was doing a lot of like admin kind of PA stuff, like basically managing meetings and outings and collaboration across teams, recruiting, corporate communication. Like I was the go-to person that would help the UX team, but that quote unquote entry level position helped me learn about UX from the people that were doing that on the day to day. And so I was able to baby step into that world by learning and uh, how do you call this? Shadowing from different designers. Like I helped improve the store experience on LeagueOfLegends.com. We have a system called emotes, which is self-expression stickers that you use during the game. I worked on like very early stages of that. Um, Personalized offers is like the ability to customize discounts for you, and your discounts are very different than every other player's in the world. And so that system was something that I was able to be a part of, which was really interesting um, and really cool. Also, during my coordinator days, I also had a lot of time to build relationship with other rioters across the org. I participated in something called Riot Rumble, which is an internal like tournament bracket for rioters to just be competitive with one another. So this is a picture where this is my Rumble team called Team Struggle Bus. I made the logo, the shirts, and we basically took a photo shoot before our finals tournament, which was really fun. We lost to a team that was way better than us, but it was still okay. It was still a lot of fun. I still keep in contact with all of them, and later would end up working with like half of them on a actual project. So one of the things that that I did in terms of transitioning into UX from a coordinator role is while I was building relationships with people, I started figuring out who needed the help and who needed specifically associate help or like someone that was interested in mentoring as well. There's a lot of people that may need the help, but they're not interested in teaching others, and that's fine. Mentoring is not for everyone, so I was able to at least find like two strong people that gave me an opportunity to grow. One of them was in the store team of League of Legends, and then the other person was actually in the web team that I'm a part of today. In that team, we worked on the redesign of the player support website, which is live, and then we started working on to some of the stuff that I do today. So, what do I do now? Well, I'm in user experience. That does not mean that when I play League of Legends, I ruin people's user experience by maybe getting a kill or two in game, although players like to make that joke a lot. And it's really fun to to talk to them and stuff. But a lot of people think that user experience is more like UI work or pretty pictures and boxes, and not. It's more visual design and graphic design than what UX at Riot is. UX at Riot is actually more about I guess like product design. Like we hire product designers more than just like interface people. And so one of the things that we do is we help identify user needs and gaps through player research and stories, and that helps us understand like the what, the why, the who, and the how of a product. So basically, during this planning process, it works to define what success in a product looks like and how you go about getting to that desired goal, to that success. It helps create accountability for what I am going to achieve or not achieve in the design or in the product itself. It ensures that all the stakeholders in a project are wholly bought out or bought into the direction, and we don't like go around in circles during a production process. We discuss impact analysis. So that's more like while the producer, quote unquote, figures out what the key performance indicators are for a project, I'm looking at how that impact will be, how will players' minds or experience this change over time with this new product. And at the end, we kind of like align, obviously, on like what we're actually building overall. Another thing that we do is this is what is most commonly part of UX at Riot, or like what people think that we do is we draw and we do journey maps and then mock-ups and then we ship. But this actually part of the process is what I call like the execution phase, which is more about like understanding like the clear goals of success, mapping like the goal that we want with like the desired outcome, understanding what's the qualitative success for a project and what's the failure looking like, and then looking at then actually slowly sketching, wireframing, designing journey maps of the entire experience and finding the spots to actually like fix or prototype specific interactions that we're not sure how players will perceive, or like through player testing and stuff like that. So this is all about, I think most people think that UX is, which is more like very tactical, but this is actually one of the smallest steps. We actually spend most of our time in this step right here, which is more of like understanding the problem space and understanding what our competitors are doing and what we can do better and what would create the best overall experience. This is actually a much more streamlined like process, because now we spend so much time understanding the space that we kind of like design very quickly and iterate on this over and over. And then the last step is visual design and then shipping and understanding like how the performance of something is and how to iterate upon it. So an MVP, or a minimal viable product, is a starting place, and we definitely want to ship that. We don't think it's going to be exceptional. We just kind of want to get something out the door and then learn as we go. Being an exceptional product requires a lot of iteration and user testing over time. And so this is an example where, where we had a thematic collection, which is like a skins page that has a lot of content related to that character in that universe, and we were able to collapse that and condense it into something more like digestible for players. We understood that the long scroll experience had a lot of like dev problems, but also a lot of people kind of like lost interest and as they were scrolling down the page. So we just kind of like put everything in one spot, and that is performing a lot better overall. So let's see. Some of the projects that I can share that are related to going through the entire, well, this one wasn't to entire process. This was more towards the iterative step of design. When I joined Universe after player support, Universe being the lore website for all of League of Legends stuff. It's a central web platform for that. One of the things that we actually were showcasing was League fan art. This was self-curated artwork for people that wanted to express their love for the IP. But this was actually a project I inherited, and it was very hard to find what you wanted to look for. It was just like a grid of art, and you just scroll down. There was no navigation whatsoever. Um, and so one of the things that was like a quick fix was more of adding navigation, adding curation of the content, exploring versus being able to save your favorites and being able to look for those. Featured being basically your landing page experience, and a quick search on the right that would let you like type in a champion's name, and then you would find all the content filtered by that champion, or the fan art filtered by that champion. So again, nothing visually, really, it's more functional than anything. And that was actually like the very first project that I worked on Universe. Since then, we've actually sunsetted this project, I think, mostly because we've been focusing on other projects right now with much bigger audiences, like the Runeterra map. Um, this being the most complex project that I've worked on. It's a very interactive map that allows you to discover the world of Runeterra and literally explore. Um, and I can show like more interactivity of that map during the Q&A if people want. But yeah, it's really cool. This was probably a year-long project, and there's a lot here. um, and then more projects that I worked on actually involve Riot Comics. This is basically creating mobile comics for League of Legends. There's sometimes a lot of the requests are more like business needs, but then how do you make the experience better for players too? So maybe like contracting an outsourcing agency to create a comics platform for us is cheaper, but it's not ideal for the player experience. So Ride Comics is one of those. It's like an evolving project that we're working on towards that. Explore page is a page that filters all the content on Universe by type. So you can have one central place to look for stories, videos, comics, music, etc. Um, and then some of the things that I'm working on right now, or learning, or struggling, is UX debt is a thing. Um, so when you try to ship something very quickly because of a time frame, you have something called tech debt. UX debt is also, it's basically the same thing, but the equivalent for the UX world. Some map is actually a very prime example about that. When I joined that team, there was a lot of, I would say there's still a lot of tech or UX debt for the map, but we just needed to get out something with a very tight deadline. And so what you see today is the minimum viable product of the map. Um, and so for me, and my focus right now for the last year has been just fixing and like basically addressing the debt of that project from a UX stance. Content strategy is actually really interesting. So there's a difference between just creating, like for the map, it was, the request was League of Legends or League of Legend players want a definitive map of the world, and that could have been an artist just drawing the map, and that could have been a JPEG or a PDF shared to the world. But we really believed in the ability to package content in a meaningful way, keeping content also evergreen by kind of sprinkling it all across the map. And so being able to strongly partner with content teams, and by this I mean narrative, like the world building people, the writers, the artists in that space, and saying, hey, there's a big opportunity here. The map is a map and it's everything, and it'll have locations, but when players see a map and it doesn't have anything to click on and it's just like locations, that's a pretty boring experience, and they're just going to go in once and then forget about it. But what would be really cool is potentially is to sprinkle all of that artwork that you have that's secret to writers only, get it approved by our stakeholders, and actually putting it into our world, give it an X and Y coordinate, and literally put like characters here too. And that was such a long battle because rioters are also very, very risk averse in terms of they don't want to fuck anything up. Like they are very, um, they want to make sure that we deliver the best experience to people. And sometimes um, players can, based on like expectations and stuff, that players can actually get pretty worked up about certain things. And so we wanted to make sure that we created a good experience that was a baseline, and with the right expectation that it would continue to grow over time. And so we felt that putting art into the map, followed by eventually like little moments throughout the year to explain story within the context of the world, would really create some great experiences. And what's been rewarding about that is that players are learning to use the map more. So we have data that that shows people reading a story and then going to the map to see where it happened, or um, lore content creators on YouTube that like to explain the world of League of Legends from a story by story basis, and then tabbing having a tab open of the map and sharing that all on a stream of like where the stories are happening. These are like behaviors that we didn't expect were going to happen, but they feel really rewarding, and we're double downing on those so that we can continue to create a very useful tool that players enjoy while they're learning about our world. Player testing is really freaking important. I think that goes hand in hand with knowing your audience. Map was not going to ship with art on the map, and it was through player testing that we discovered that players wanted art on the map in some way, shape, or form. And so that was the ammo that I needed to give to the stakeholders, to give to the teams, to narrative, and say, look, players want this, and if they don't get this, they're going to be underwhelmed, underserved. And so we were able to crunch it like 2 months before the map, which is kind of insane because that should have been like way ahead of time, but it did happen that way. And I'm just glad that it was something that we did early, and that's something that I'm trying to do as early as possible with future projects so that we are very informed and we are very user focused in everything that we do. And then journey mapping early. So journey map is like designing the entire flow of how a player interacts with something, with a feature, and all the emotions that they're feeling, what the loopholes, like everything that's broken, everything that's good about that whole system. And so one of the things that we did in map is we journey mapped the entire thing with all of the backlog items that we had, like all our wish list items, everything, but we never really journey mapped with the minimum viable product, which resulted in all these issues when it launched. And that's why we also have debt. So that's definitely on me, but it's something that I learned and that I'm definitely like making sure that I don't commit that same mistake, or I'm using map as that reminder of like, hey, make sure that everything falls into place accordingly, that everything has a place, that it's easy to use, that it's accessible, and that it's delightful. And that's really all that I have about presentation wise. I feel like I'm much better about Q&A. So that being said, do you have any questions?
Okay. So first of all, thank you. Very, very interesting. All right, class, questions. I don't want to hog all of Vivianette's time here, so I want to let you all have dibs.
I can go ahead and ask a preliminary question. So, hi there, TA standing in for a student question really quickly. It sounds like journey mapping was something we talked about pretty frequently in this presentation. There's quite a few students in here who are pretty new and may be considering say dropping UX classes into their curriculum, since they do have that time ahead of them. Would you mind explaining kind of what a journey map is for those who may have never seen it or heard about it?
Yeah, so I can definitely double down. So do you see the picture right here with the whiteboard and a lot of screens and tons of sticky notes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so journey mapping is essentially like breaking down an entire system, a feature. In this case, this was me learning, by the way, so this is a screenshot that I can share, but this is not a practice at all, or something. I don't have no visibility of whether or not they're doing this. But during store team, I wanted to explore a way to be able to gift and receive better or more fluidly. And so what you do is you break down an entire system or feature. And in this case, I print screened and printed everything out from like moment to moment of interactivity all the way to the end. And then you break down also like the user level and then the riot level. So what's happening to the user at every step and what's happening behind the scenes. So this is riot in this case. So just so that we can understand from a tech perspective, what are the actors of this entire process. So for gifting specifically, we were looking at like, can players, like when I receive something, I can't see what it is. It kind of happens as a notification, but like it kind of gets hidden. I don't have the ability to gift back, and that was like the one thing that I really wanted to do was I wanted to celebrate the idea of gifting and receiving and then giving it back to, or giving something else back if you wanted to, rather than closing and then having to go back into the store and like, I don't know. I just wanted to speed that process. And so I was writing tickets of like, okay, well, I feel excitement for this for this step when the unboxing of the item or the gift was happening, but then the moment of the last step of the current flow, where it's pretty much a pop-up that just says okay and that's it. I was reporting that like I felt underwhelmed, like I wanted to I didn't know what to do next. And I didn't know where to go to gift. And so that's where then why you start noting or looking for like those gaps, you start figuring out, is that a problem space for me to solve? And so essentially journey mapping is just a process that allows you to find where the gaps are in the system, where the pain points are for players and or users, and clearly understand also like the problem there for you to then solve later. So a lot of it's actually like something very early that you do. I also like to do it during the design and making sure that like when something like map, for instance, map is a very complex step because there's a lot of things that are happening. Actually, I'm just gonna pull out map real quick. Let's see. So map is one where, okay, of course. Map is one where there's a lot of interactivity, and we wanted to make sure that things were happening at each step, and nothing was kind of like falling, or we weren't forgetting things into place. So for an example of something that I didn't catch early on, actually I caught early on, we just weren't able to implement and it became part of the debt, was that we have these beautiful overlays when you hover over a region that tells you like pretty much where how countries or how factions are kind of like located into our world, how they fit. Naxos specifically is a expansionist, like kind of like conqueror nation. They kind of remind me of Rome a little bit. And yeah, and so you can kind of see they're spreading throughout the entire map versus Demacia is pretty contained or like, kind of like stuck in a corner. But when I click on any of these things, you kind of lose all of that detail of that region overlay and where something starts and where something ends. And so that was something that players were actually looking for, and we missed that step. And that was mostly because I couldn't, I personally couldn't win a fight with a visual designer on like user needs versus like look and feel of the map. And also there's a lot of density of content in this map already, so it might create more visual noise. At the end, it was something that we just backlogged, but it was nice to know that people wanted that. That was something that user journey helped me figure out, but I forgot to actually have a solution, a good solution before launch. Um, Other things are like when these things show up, like things, the items, the map elements actually have specific zoom levels that they show up to create, to kind of like show and hide different density of the content on the map. And also things like the content that's in, or like the items that are in the content panel versus the items that are in the map itself. Um, so yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So a lot of these students in the class right now are sophomores or juniors. We only got 5 minutes left before I have to release them back into the wild. What advice do you have for them on how they should structure their plan of study going forward? What do you think they need a lot of, and what do you think they can overlook to do the kind of work you do?
I actually find so if you want to work in a company that's user focused, that's Riot. There's a lot of tech companies. I highly recommend that everyone should look at a user, a UX class, or at least understand the concept of customer, customer driven, or not customer driven. Sorry, like just like customer focused design. I also think that it would make you really marketable if you know something about research. So at Riot, we have an entire research team that's called Insights, and they're user researchers, and we can tap into their their tools. And we can literally, a lot of teams, like a lot of R&D teams that are like heavier stacked and stuff like that, like let's example game 2 or game 3 or something like that, they can easily go to an insights team and say like, hey, we need like a group of people that like play test like this thing, and we're testing these things. They do that a lot with League of Legends and like new champions and stuff like that. Well, my team is actually not it's a very small team, and not everyone has that skill. So being able, for me specifically, to say I conduct my own testing, and then I learn from the user researchers, but I actually have to do a lot by myself, or within the other UXers. This is actually like really, really important in order to understand like what your audience actually like needs and wants, and then figure out then how that informs your design overall. That goes with gaming, that goes with UX, web, like anything that a user interacts with, you should test as quickly as possible, as often as possible, over and over with players. And I think so if there's anything like that, I'm unfamiliar with the UX curriculum, but if there's something like that, I would definitely double down on those kind of classes. I actually, my miss is my misses is actually like taking an internship very early on rather than a little bit later. Again, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I thought it was animation, and I did a lot of heavy animation stuff and prep, but I actually didn't end up pursuing that career. So make sure that you find out first what you want to do, and then you start like focusing your internships and your conferences and anything that your extra stuff that's not like school stuff. Focus that on that career goal.
And what about
sorry.
What about the web students? I have a lot of students who are web oriented. How could they get in at Riot or a company like Riot?
So Riot is really looking at like experience first too. Like when they're looking at hiring, they value a lot your portfolio and the experience. They value company culture. They definitely value gamers and all of that stuff. But one of the things that they're looking for is someone. When it comes to company culture, we don't actually mean like gamer. We're actually talking about like whether or not you work in a collaborative space, whether or not like you're um, if you have the experience working in these collaborative spaces. And so if you participate in something similar to that, whether it's web or not, be able to express that in your portfolio or resume in some way, shape, or form, and definitely um, in your interviews. I mean, most of my experiences were actually school experiences because I didn't work outside of Purdue before Riot. And for what specifically, front end development is a very highly seeked art craft. Something really interesting right now is that tech artists are really popular, which are like programmers, like front end developers, but they're really artsy. Um, that's really interesting, and we definitely look for those kind of guys. And then for me, well, I know basics of CSS, HTML, and other like web programs or web tools and stuff like that. Honestly, in a big company like Riot, the chances are that they already have a front end developer for you, and all you have to do is just focus on like the design or the visual aesthetics or like the look and feel, like some very specialized focus, rather than like a generalist. But generalists are really really good um, during the beginning stages, entering smaller companies and gaining that experience before jumping into something like a board.
All right. Well, we are now out of time, and I cannot thank you enough for setting aside this time for us and giving us some really great information.
Thanks a million.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Are you
Class dismissed. If you want to take off, go ahead.
Are you comfortable with students reaching out to you on LinkedIn,
Okay.
etc.?
I am. Just on the messages, like just at least share like, hey, I was in this talk or whatever, so I know.
Gotcha.
Because I also get spammed from people I don't know, and I tend to ignore that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Hey, thanks a million.
Thank you so much.
So, yeah, it's for real, man. Thank you.